Guts and Blackpowder are line infantry, or private, or ranker, or whatever the heck you want to call it. It's one of 7 main classes that you can choose from in the game. The line infantry does something, depending on what specialized weapon you use with this class. There is a default weapon with 5 primary alternatives available to the line infantry, and there are 3 different secondaries or melees that you can choose from with this class. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all the weapons available to the infantry and rank them from best to worst based on how they perform, how useful they are, and how they compare to each other. I started making this video back when GNB was in 0.14.6, but then I procrastinated, so by the time this video releases, it's going to be version 0.14.8. Also, this video is just really long, so yeah. The first weapon to talk about is the default musket. This is a firearm that, considered by many, has well-rounded shooting capabilities. The musket shoots 1 pellet that deals a base 120 damage, can hit a maximum of 11 zombies, has a range of 700 studs and high accuracy, and has a reload time of around 10 seconds and reduced movement speed while reloading. The stats of this weapon makes it particularly useful when targeting specific enemies like bombers, igniters, or sapper zombies. It can also be used to shoot through a line of multiple zombies if the opportunity presents itself. However, this act of crowd control is usually best reserved for the seaman class. What makes the musket special is the unique attachment it has, the bayonet. This allows the musket to be used as a close quarters lance-like weapon that deals a high base damage of 55. And has 2 directions of attack, the underhand thrust and then overhead thrust. The down thrust has longer reach with considerably fast swing rate, while the upper thrust has less range and hits slower. However, it can land headshots more easily. The bayonet can only hit 1 target at a time, meaning it's best used to pick off zombies one by one when they are considerably distant from one another. While the musket is in its bayonet mode, the weapon will still have a cursor directionality similar to when aiming a gun in third person. Because of this reason, it might be better to just use the bayonet in first person. On top of its stats, the bayonet can receive a special buff from an officer's charge, gaining an insta-hit feature that will automatically deal damage to zombies that touch the weapon, and gaining a high damage multiplier, supposedly 5 times the base damage of the bayonet. This special buff allows the musket to wipe out hordes of zombies and is by far one of the greatest features that this weapon has. Moving on to the carbine. This is pretty much a shorter and more maneuverable version of the musket. The carbine fires a pellet in a less powerful fashion, dealing less damage, having less penetration range and accuracy than the musket, but can be reloaded faster at a supposed 7.7 seconds, and has less movement debuff for the user while reloading. The faster reload and movement speed gives carbine users some extra flexibility, allowing them to act like a mobile fire hitter. You could pretty much fire at anything and there wouldn't be much consequence for it since you can regain a shot quicker and not fall behind teammates while traversing through a map. While this firearm may not have as much penetration and accuracy as the musket, it's still best used when prioritizing igniters and bombers due to its reload speed. The carbine does not have a bayonet attachment like the musket, it instead has the ability to shove. When this ability is activated, the carbine can stun up to 3 zombies in front of the user and deal 10 damage. This does not work on bombers. Now we move on to the Pike, or the lance. This weapon is unique due to the fact that it is the only primary alternative to the line infantry that does not have any shooting capabilities, at least as of version 0.14.6. It is instead a purely close combat weapon. The Pike deals a base damage of 50 and has a base max hit of 3 targets. The supposed swing rate of the lance is 0.5 seconds and the max distance being 13. Now if you played GNB for a while and been through several content updates, you will note that the stats sections of the weapons in the shop are not always accurate. Regardless of what the stats sections say however, the lance indeed does have a high hit rate and a long but narrow range. In fact, the lance has the longest distance of any melee in the game. Additionally, it has a unique pierce ability. Basically, if you thrust the lance and it happens to kill a target, in that same thrust you can regain a hit. This means that if you hit 3 zombies with the lance and kill 1, you can hit a 4th zombie in the same attack. this can go up to a fifth. As a drawback of the weapon, whenever you equip the lance, the user will have a movement debuff. This isn't particularly a problem if you're being relatively stationary in one area and attacking. And if you're trying to simply move around the map, you can just have it unequipped. The Pike has a vertical directionality in third person similar to when aiming a gun. However, this directionality is limited, unlike the musket's bayonet. At the lowest, the end of the weapon will usually be pointed just a bit above the ground. That means if you're trying to get a view of the field in third person, you won't lose out on much range when attacking, so using the lance in this way with shift lock on isn't entirely a bad idea. To top it all off, the lance also receives the same special buff as the bayonet whenever an officer uses their charge. The lance will be positioned to hit zombies on touch and have a high damage multiplier, making it great for taking out a horde. The rifle is another alternative that can replace the musket and is one of 2 firearms added since the Copenhagen update. The idea of the rifle as a firearm is very basic. You can shoot a very powerful shot but with slower reload time. The rifle's pellet deals 195 damage, hits up to 16 targets, travels up to 1500 studs and sports even higher accuracy than the musket, all at the cost of a 14-second reload and even slower movement while reloading. The advantage of the rifle is that you are guaranteed to hit whatever you're aiming at, and that you will take out anything you shoot through. The rifle also ignores the damage resistance that Sabre zombies have to firearms and headshots. This means that you are guaranteed to kill zappers with this weapon, even on hardcore mode as long as you headshot them. Another trait the rifle has is the ability of aiming down sights, or ADS, a feature that no other firearm has. This could be useful for aiming at zombies that are egregiously far away, but there are not that many situations where such feature is necessary. The other firearm added in the Copenhagen update was the Horse Artillery Pistol. This firearm is noticeably different from others, having 2 barrels instead of 1. The in-game shop describes this weapon as a double-barreled pistol carbine, with a smoothbore right barrel and a rifled left barrel. When equipped, the player has a visual GUI that shows the condition of each barrel, whether they are loaded or not. Each barrel fires a pellet that both have similar performance, dealing 85 damage, hitting up to 6 targets, and reaching up to 550 studs. The difference between the 2 barrels is accuracy, the right barrel being somewhat inaccurate, whereas the left barrel is considerably more accurate. The max reload time of the gun when reloading both barrels is somewhere between 13 to 14 seconds. The inaccurate barrel always fires first when both barrels are loaded. If the user reloads the gun when both are empty, the cartridge on the left barrel will be rammed in first. At this point, the user can unequip the firearm to cancel animation once the left barrel is loaded, allowing the user to only have the accurate barrel ready for use. The user can also unequip to cancel animation when the second projectile is fully rammed in, skipping the process of fully putting the ramrod back into its notch. This doesn't save much time when shooting right after a full reload, as re-equipping the pistol carbine has an animation that still takes some time away from actually firing. However, it can be useful if the user plans to do anything else right after reloading both barrels, like switching over to melee to attack or simply regaining movement speed. Reloading the right barrel of the Horse Artillery Pistol while the left barrel is still loaded means an even lesser reload time when loading only the left barrel. The Horse Artillery Pistol also has the ability to toggle double shot, as shown as a visual GUI as well. When a player toggles double shot, they will fire both barrels at once instead of one at a time. This can be useful to instantly take out Sabre zombies with a headshot in hardcore mode. The final primary alternative to talk about for the line infantry is the air rifle, a relatively recent weapon as of version 0.14.6, added since the Roscoff update. The air rifle is by far the most unique gun in terms of its functionality. To start off, the air rifle is technically not a firearm, as it does not use any of the flintlock systems to shoot pellets. Instead, it uses pressurized air. This rifle can shoot in a semi-automatic manner, firing one bullet almost immediately after the last. The gun initially starts with and can be loaded up to 20 pellets. The player will automatically start reloading once all pellets are shot, but can also choose to reload additional bullets by using the reload specific input. And like all other guns, users have infinite ammunition. The time it takes to fully reload the air rifle from 0 pellets is 13.4 seconds. Users can cancel the reload anytime by attempting to shoot or by unequipping. The air rifle is the first formal gun in Guts and Blackpowder to have limited use even despite the infinite pellets. Whenever the air rifle is shot, it will lose air pressure. Equipping will provide a visual GUI in the form of a meter that reveals how much pressure is left in the canister that is attached to the gun. The rifle can be shot 31 times before the pressure completely runs out, to which it can no longer be used. And as the air pressure decreases, both the damage and accuracy also decreases. When the pressure level is at its highest, the air rifle's pellet will have a base damage of 65 and moderate accuracy. The decrease in damage and accuracy of this weapon is very little when the air pressure is high, but as it gets lower, the drop-off in power starts to become dramatic. The table provides the damage dealt by pellets after a certain number of uses. The air rifle can deal above 60 damage as long as it has been used less than 15 times. From 15 to 20 shots, the damage will drop from 60 to 45. From 20 to 25 shots, the damage will drop from 45 to 20. After 25 shots, the air rifle deals less than 20 damage, not even enough to kill a bomber in one body shot. And the final shot deals close to 1 damage if it isn't already at that value. Regardless of the pressure level, the pellets fired from this gun can hit up to 2 targets and can travel up to 300 studs. In the shop, there is a consumable utility item called the air canister, an item that can replace the initial canister of the air rifle when used. Each air canister costs 100 francs and you can buy as many of them as you want. However, you can only carry 1 spare canister per life. Once used, the spare canister is lost and requires another purchase or equipping of an already purchased canister. This weapon is essentially a gun that shoots very weak pellets but at high fire rate, making it very useful when targeting bombers or igniters, especially when they are spawning or appearing close to the player's holdout positions. The limited use of this weapon requires the players to use it conservatively, especially in objective mode. If used wisely enough, a spare canister may not be necessary. Now to talk about the weapon category consisting of only melees. The first and the default melee for most classes is the Sabre. This is a standard bladed weapon that is used for close combat and has 4 modes or directions of attack. According to the stats of the in-game shop, the Sabre deals a base 30 damage, has a swing rate of 0.55 seconds, has 3 penetration, meaning that it can hit up to 3 zombies at once, has a max distance of 6 studs, and has a 2.3 headshot damage multiplier. Only the damage, headshot multiplier, and max hit stats of the shop accurately reflect all directional attacks of the Sabre. The swing rate and the range of the weapon actually varies depending on what mode of attack you use. The Sabre has a thrust attack, a swing to the right, a swing to the left, and a downward swing from above the player's head. The thrust attack has the most range and the fastest swing rate. The side swings have lesser range and swing rate, and the downward swing has the least range and is the slowest to use. Each directional attack has its intended use, the thrust attack being used for aggression and safety, particularly when dealing with runners, side swings to have better chance at hitting multiple targets, and the downward swing to land headshots easier. One alternative to the Sabre is the hand axe, a weapon available to both line infantry and seamen. This melee is shorter than the Sabre but generally deals higher damage and also has 4 directional attacks. According to the stats of the in-game shop, the hand axe deals a base 45 damage, has a swing rate of 0.4 seconds, can hit 3 zombies at once, has a max range of 4, and has a 2.3 times headshot damage multiplier. Again, the swing rate and the range depends on the mode of attack. The hand axe has an underhand swing, a rightward swing, a leftward swing, and an overhead downward swing. The underhand upward swing is the fastest, the side swing slower, and the overhead swing is the slowest. The underhand swing has the most range while the side swings and overhead attack are shorter. The hand axe's directional attacks have similar intention as the Sabre. The overhead swing for easier headshots, a side swing for hitting more targets, and the underhand swing for more aggression and insurance against threats. The third melee alternative is exclusive to the Ranger's class, the Heavy Sabre. This weapon detaches from the simplicity of the other two melee weapons by having more unique features and properties. At a general level, the Heavy Sabre is a weapon that deals high damage and has long range, and like the other two melees, has 4 directions of attack. According to the shop, the Heavy Sabre deals 43 or 27 damage depending on the mode of attack, has a swing rate of 0.7 seconds, hits up to 3 targets, reaches up to 8 studs, and has a 2.3 times headshot damage multiplier. For the directions of the Heavy Sabre's attack, the user can perform an underhand thrust, an overhead thrust, a right swing, or left swing. The underhand thrust deals 43 damage, having the fastest swing rate and the longest range. The head level thrust also deals 43 damage, but swings the slowest and has less range. Both the side swings deal 27 damage, attacks slow, and supposedly has the same range as the upper thrust, with wide coverage in front of the user. Additionally, the side swings temporarily slow down zombies that are hit. The directional attacks of the Heavy Sabre has intentionally used similar to the other two infantry melees. The down thrust helps to attack at a safer distance and speed, the upper thrust is used for easier headshots, and the wide side swings can help in crowd control. The Heavy Sabre also receives the same special buff that the musket's bayonet and the lance gets during an officer charge. The Heavy Sabre will be readied into a position where it automatically hits zombies making contact and will have a damage multiplier. The Heavy Sabre having an ability like this is interesting and quite a particular advantage that neither the Sabre or hand axe has. Now that I've gone over every weapon, it's time to actually show how they compare to each other. There's going to be 2 different rankings, one for the primaries and one for the melees. Yeah, I don't know how to make a good looking list, so I just found this on TierMaker and put this together. Anyways, here's an objectively correct take on the line infantry's primary ranking. At the bottom of this comparison list is the rifle, probably not surprising for many of you, and you can probably guess why it's sitting here at last spot. The rifle isn't exactly a bad weapon. Shooting high-powered shots at slower reload time is a fair trade-off. However, the advantages of the rifle simply doesn't have much use in the game. There aren't many situations where you need to have such range and accuracy. Almost anywhere you would use the rifle, weapons like the musket could be applied just fine. The extra penetration doesn't do much either. It's already quite rare to hit 11 targets with the musket, and there would be almost no cases where you'd shoot through 15 perfectly lined up zombies. The most useful thing about the rifle is arguably the damage and ignorance to zapper resistances. These traits allow you to kill zappers pretty easily, even on hardcore mode, although you may have to aim for the head. Now this doesn't make the rifle all that unique because there's quite a few weapons that can achieve this as well, most notably the horse artillery pistol. The hat can consistently take out zappers even on hardcore as long as you headshot them with both barrels. The hat may have similar reload time as the rifle, but the fire rate allows it to be useful against bombers and igniters as well. There's also the Seaman firearms, which can one-shot zappers on top of being good crowd control. Well, at least for the blunderbuss and navy pistol, but I don't think I can really say the same about the noggin in terms of crowd control due to its lesser spread. Well, to summarize, the rifle isn't inherently a bad weapon, but it's by far the worst primary due to having useless advantages, and because whatever the rifle is good at, other weapons can do but more. Standing above the rifle is the musket. Now this might trigger a lot of you, but just hear me out. To put it simply, the musket has its standard shooting ability, a fairly powerful shot that's quite reliable for eliminating prioritized targets at a distance. However, the guns with higher fire rate are usually better for specific targeting because you can have your next shot ready faster. Even if those guns have less range, accuracy, and penetration, they still get the job just fine, even officer pistols. You may have to be closer and find a bit more opening, but this isn't a huge deal for most situations. Okay, so there's better options for killing bombers and igniters, but at least the musket has the bayonet, right? Well, yes, the bayonet is good for dealing with zombies streaming in, and more importantly has the special bayonet buff from officer charges, allowing it to take out hordes very quickly. When comparing the musket to other firearms, it's pretty good overall with its own gimmick. However, there's just one problem. Okay, I'll talk about the Heavy Sabre when I get to the melee ranking, but all I'm going to say right now is the Heavy Sabre is way better than the Musket's bayonet in 99% of situations. If you equip the Heavy Sabre, there's no need to have a musket when you can just have firearms that shoot faster. For this reason, the musket is going to be in the lower ranks even though it is still a good weapon overall. The musket is still going to be better than the rifle though, since you can just shoot more frequently with reliable power. From here on out, I'm going to say that all the weapons in the rest of the line infantry's primary ranking are all great and a good option to choose from. The placing for these next two weapons was kind of hard to decide as they're both pretty similar in their role and both good at what they do. Ultimately, the Carbine is going to be in 4th place. As said before, the Carbine allows you to just shoot with little consequence. When used casually, you can fire at anything, move at the same pace as your team in objective mode, and you can shoot again much earlier than the musket. The Carbine is most practical in its role of eliminating bombers' igniters, particularly when used in areas or situations where the team is holding out. The shove isn't as big of an ability like the bayonet, but it's quite fun to use and can help to deal with runners, defend structures, or just be used when first engaging with a target. It's best to immediately switch over to your melee right after shoving some zombies so that you can safely get rid of them, since switching over to your melee is quick. However, switching from melee to Carbine to use the shove again is quite slow due to the animation of equipping a firearm. There's not much else to say, the Carbine ranks higher than the rifle and the musket just because you can shoot more often. The same pretty much goes for the Horse Artillery Pistol, the pistol carbine that's going to take its place higher than, I guess, the normal carbine? I'm assuming that these are both technically carbines, but I don't really know what a pistol carbine is supposed to be. Anyhow, the hat fulfills a similar role to the carbine in that it can fire frequently, using 2 barrels with a long cooldown instead of 1 with a fast reload. Having a reload speed about 13 to 14 seconds, the hat actually has a fire rate that is virtually faster than the carbine, having 7 seconds per shot rather than 7.7 seconds. While the hat may not have a fast reload walk speed or the shove ability of the carbine, it can actually be more versatile. A common way the Horse Artillery Pistol is used is shooting only the right barrel and then reloading, using the left only when it is necessary. Reloading just the right barrel takes about a second longer to load than the carbine, which is still quite swift. If there are 2 prioritized targets that need to be shot at, the HAP allows you to shoot at both immediately, unlike the carbine. And since the left barrel has even higher accuracy than the right, you have greater chance to hit the target if they happen to be further away. The double shot ability is something that is only going to be useful for instantly taking out zappers, but it's still another point that the HAP has over the carbine. When comparing the carbine and the HAP, the carbine tends to have a more relaxing playstyle, while the HAP has greater potential if used wisely. For this reason, the Horse Artillery Pistol is going to be above the carbine. But honestly, both weapons are great, and I only placed one above the other for the sake of this being a ranking. Use whatever carbine you like, one isn't truly better than the other in this case. However, what is better than the carbine and the Horse Artillery Pistol in terms of prioritization is a certain rifle, not the one that's sitting at the bottom of the ranking. I'm talking about the air rifle. Let's be real here, the air rifle is the best barrel popper in the game, and for one very simple reason: fire rate. Unlike any other gun, you can constantly hit targets, one immediately after the last without a long reload between each shot. Although this weapon has the least powerful shots with a damage of 65 and 1 penetration, none of these matter when it purely comes to shooting low health targets like bombers and igniters. You may have to be the closest to the targets and have enough room to hit them compared to any firearm, but if there are multiple bombers or igniters closing in, you can easily hit them all before they get too close. If you're using an air rifle, you could potentially be the only one shooting at bombers and still be eliminating all of them for your team. Now to talk about the real downside of the air rifle, the limited air pressure. You can't just spam this weapon at any point of the map. You have to really conserve the shots for moments when they really matter. Usually, you're going to use the air rifle heavily during finales of objective maps or at any other point where bombers and igniters start spawning infrequently. If you use the gun wisely enough, a spare canister wouldn't be necessary. Personally, I never bought an air canister since the item came out, both for the reason that it's just too expensive and that I never really ran out of shots when using the air rifle. I imagine that the only time a spare canister is needed is if you're really the only person shooting at bombers and igniters the entire time while your team is taking too long to complete sections of an objective map. But honestly, for every objective map, there's only a few sections where such enemies stream in. Overall, the air rifle only excels at one particular thing, but it's so good at doing it that it earns its place at second best primary alternative. As for the best primary alternative of the line infantry, at least in my opinion, it would have to be the lance, or the pike. People seemed to hate this thing back then and even seem to hate it now, and I'm not entirely too sure why. But as of version 0.14.6, the pike is by far one of the most powerful weapons in the game. A lot of people only take into consideration that using the lance will leave you without a firearm, which is certainly a downside, but people ignore just how good the pike is as a melee weapon. The first thing to point out is the damage output. It deals a base 50 damage with one of the fastest swing rates and, according to the in-game shop, it has a swing rate of 0.5 seconds. This may not be accurate as the swing rate is supposedly faster, but assuming that it is, this means that the DPS of the lance on a single target is 100. The damage of the musket's bayonet is 55 and has similar but slower swing rate, having a potential DPS also close to 100 on a single target. However, then you consider the lance's base penetration of 3 and having a DPS of 300. Already, this is the highest DPS that can be dealt by any melee weapon. But it doesn't stop there because the lance also has the pierce ability that allows it to hit up to 5 targets at once, giving it max potential DPS of 500. This is the second highest DPS that can be dealt by any weapon. Yes, that's right, second highest. Can you guess what weapon deals the highest potential DPS? It would actually be the knockgun. When you consider a fully loaded knockgun having a base damage of 1750 hitting up to 77 zombies at once, and assume that the reload time is 23 seconds, the max potential DPS of the weapon is 5,858. That's a lot, but we all know that you won't consistently hit more than 10 zombies with this thing. Plus, most of that damage is going nowhere, so we could just say that the lance has the highest consistent DPS of any other weapon. However, all of these are just numbers, and as I've said before, the stats may not be 100% accurate. What's more important is using the lance. If you've actually used this weapon before on a crowd of zombies, you would note that this thing absolutely shreds. People have often compared the lance to the musket, arguing that with the musket you can use it similarly to a lance while also being able to shoot. First off, the bayonet's performance does not even compare to the lance, hitting only one zombie at a time at a slower rate. As for losing out on a firearm with the pike, this is where I would bring up the range of the melee. The length of this stick is not only helpful for hitting more targets or attacking safely, but it can almost entirely make up for the lack of firearm. What I mean is that a lot of things you could only achieve with a gun or with some projectile, it can also be achieved using the lance simply due to how long it is. For example, hitting bombers. If you can hit a bomber with the very end of the pike, you are guaranteed to take minimal damage, and if you're lucky enough, you might not take any damage at all. Now, you might be thinking to yourself that you shouldn't even be trying to take any damage at all, and you would be right. While you usually leave the job of popping bombers to those with firearms, it may be necessary to attack using the lance to prevent bombers from pushing back defensive positions of the team. There's actually a lot more to say when it comes to the lance and its range, like how you can hit through walls easier or confidently spawn camp zombies, but it would just be too much for this video. Overall, the lance is an incredible weapon that excels on the front lines with its high damage output and its many situational uses, and it's the most impactful weapon for the line infantry, which is why it's ranked as the best. Detaching from the primary list, it's time to show how the 3 melee weapons of the line infantry class compare to each other. At third spot, I have the hand axe, a weapon that's very good but isn't as favorable as the other melees, and that of course would be due to the short range. It's a riskier weapon to use since you have to be closer to the zombies in order to hit them, which usually isn't a problem against shamblers or zappers, but can be a problem when dealing with runners. The short range not only makes it riskier to use, but it actually kind of holds back the damage output of the weapon. While it can hit up to 3 zombies like most melees, the short range means that you might not consistently hit that maximum value, particularly when used in crowds in open spaces. You'll hit 3 zombies the easiest when swinging behind barricades where zombies are all bunched up. And a situation like that is what allows the hand axe to shine as a melee alternative. So despite being in last, it's still a fair option to choose. Next we have the Sabre. It's a perfect default weapon for all the classes and has comfortable range and damage. While it doesn't have as much base damage as the hand axe, the length of the attacks allow it to easily hit crowds. The thrust attack is also very reliable for dealing with runners with its maximal range and speed. There's honestly not much else to say about the Sabre. It doesn't have any glaring downsides or upsides, and it does its role just fine. If you're looking to use a weapon that's just straight up overpowered with only massive advantages and barely any weaknesses, then you should use the Heavy Sabre. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that nobody really talks about how broken this melee is, like it's actually ridiculous. To start off with its so-called downsides, it has the worst side swings of any melee, but this doesn't really matter because you can just never use them. Its fastest directional attack swings a bit slower than the Sabre and the hand axe, but this is also negligible since it still swings reliably fast. Now on to the upsides of the Heavy Sabre. The down and up thrusts of the weapon deals 43 damage, only 2 short of the hand axe, and has significantly longer range than the Sabre. So basically, the Heavy Sabre has the best of both worlds in terms of the Sabre and the hand axe. But on top of all of that, it has the bayonet's charge, getting instantaneous hits and damage multiplier. Yeah, did you know that the Heavy Sabre is good? I said back with the muskets ranking that the Heavy Sabre is better than bayonet, and I'll explain why here. The bayonet has superior damage hit rate and range, but can only hit 1 zombie at a time, meaning that it's not very effective against crowds. The only better stat the Heavy Sabre has is the 3 penetration, but that paired with its reliable damage, swing rate, and range, makes it good not just for picking zombies off, but also for crowd control. Another significant difference between the Heavy Sabre and the bayonet is that the Heavy Sabre does not suffer from the cursor directionality during third person, meaning that you can use the Heavy Sabre while getting a view of the field without problems. I've heard the argument that using the bayonet in first person is not problematic once you learn where zombies spawn. This is only true if you're not in danger. If you're in a desperate situation where you're surrounded by zombies and all, it doesn't matter if you know where zombies spawn, you just want to know what's going on around you. Third person mode gives you a better idea of your situation than in first person, and situational awareness is the key to survival. Another small point that can be made about the Heavy Sabre is that if an officer uses charge while a ranker doesn't have the musket equipped, it would take a while for them to start charging since the firearm equip animation takes time. On the other hand, you could just whip out the Heavy Sabre if it was unequipped and you would immediately be getting the charge. All of these reasons is what makes the Heavy Sabre so much better than the bayonet, and is the reason why I placed the musket so low. It's because the musket's special trait is no longer needed if you just use the Heavy Sabre. You can pair this weapon with a faster reloading gun, and you would be more effective than just using the musket. I've compared the Heavy Sabre and the bayonet, but you might be wondering how this melee compares to the lance. Well, it's very simple. The lance is just better than the Heavy Sabre in 99% of cases. It has higher base damage, faster swings, more range, and even more penetration with its pierce ability. The lance can also be used in third person since it has limited vertical directionality, having the end of the weapon pointed just above the ground, not sacrificing much range and being good for both survival and DPS. The only thing the Heavy Sabre has over the Pike is not having the movement debuff on equip, so the only situation where the Heavy Sabre is better is when you're purely trying to survive. Overall, the Heavy Sabre is just really strong, so much to the point where it not only trivializes the Sabre and the hand axe, but even the default primary weapon for the line infantry, so it takes its spot for being far above the other 2 melee weapons. With all that being said, this ranking is finally over. Do keep in mind that this is as of version 0.14.6 and things may change in the future. But what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree with this list? If you disagree, how would you rank it any differently and why?